Imagine spending more than 3 decades watching your biggest rival fight wars across the world. Not to cheer for them, not to criticize them, but to study every single move they make like a scientist studying an experiment. Guys, this is the part of the story that many people are missing when they talk about the rivalry between the United States and China. Everyone is focused on tariffs, trade disputes, semiconductor restrictions, and diplomatic tensions over Taiwan and the South China Sea. But underneath all of that, something much bigger has been happening for over 30 years. China has been conducting one of the longest strategic observation projects in modern history. And the question we should all ask ourselves is very simple. What happens when a country spends 3 decades studying every strength, every weakness, every success, and every mistake of the world's most powerful military? Think about that for a moment, because the answer is shaping the future of global power right now. Back in 1991, the world witnessed something extraordinary during the Gulf War. The United States demonstrated a level of military precision that shocked almost everyone. Iraq possessed one of the largest armies in the Middle East at the time. Many analysts expected a difficult and prolonged conflict. Instead, the war unfolded with astonishing speed. Advanced aircraft, precision-guided weapons, satellite communications, and coordinated operations completely transformed how warfare was perceived. For many countries, this was simply impressive. But for China, it was a wake-up call. Chinese leaders and military planners realized they were looking at the future and they were not prepared for it. At that time, China was not the technological powerhouse people know today. Its military was large in numbers, but many of its systems were outdated. Its navy focused primarily on coastal defense. Its air force operated older aircraft that would have struggled against advanced Western systems. Its military structure belonged to an earlier era. But instead of panicking, Beijing began asking questions. What exactly made America so powerful? Was it the number of soldiers? Was it the size of the economy? Was it superior weapons? The answer they arrived at was much more specific. Information was the key. Understand this. Modern wars were no longer simply about having the biggest army. They were about knowing where every enemy asset was located, communicating instantly, and striking targets before opponents even understood what was happening. Whoever controlled information controlled the battlefield. That realization changed everything. Now here's where it gets interesting. China did not decide to compete with America on America's terms. They understood that trying to build a larger military than the United States would be extremely expensive and probably impossible in the short term. Instead, they chose a different path. They asked themselves another question. What if we don't need to beat America everywhere? What if we only need to make it extremely difficult for America to operate close to China? That single question became the foundation of an entirely different strategy. For decades, American military power relied heavily on aircraft carriers. These floating cities project enormous force thousands of miles away from home. They have been symbols of American dominance since World War II. But China started viewing them differently. Instead of seeing carriers as unbeatable weapons, they saw them as expensive targets. Think about that. The very symbol of American power became something China wanted to neutralize. This led to major investments in missile technology, especially anti-ship ballistic missiles designed to threaten large naval vessels operating near Chinese territory. The idea was straightforward. If carriers cannot safely approach the region, America's ability to project power becomes far more complicated. This approach eventually became known as anti-access and area denial strategies. Now think about the psychological impact of that. For decades, the assumption was that American forces could arrive almost anywhere and operate with relative freedom. China challenged that assumption, not by trying to dominate the entire globe, but by making one critical region increasingly dangerous for outside forces. Then came another pivotal moment. In 1999, during the Kosovo conflict. Most people barely remember this event today, but in China, it became incredibly significant. During NATO's air campaign against Serbia, the Chinese embassy in Belgrade was accidentally struck by American bombs, resulting in the deaths of Chinese citizens. The United States apologized and described the incident as a tragic error involving outdated maps. However, regardless of the official explanation, China's leadership focused on a different lesson. Their concern was not only the strike itself, their concern was America's ability to conduct such sophisticated operations across vast distances with overwhelming technological superiority. China realized how vulnerable it was. They had no effective way to track stealth aircraft, no reliable way to defend against certain advanced systems, and no realistic means of responding proportionally. That realization accelerated multiple programs simultaneously. Investments in radar systems increased. Research into stealth aircraft intensified. Electronic warfare capabilities expanded dramatically. Cyber operations became a growing priority. Beijing reached a conclusion that would influence decades of planning. Never allow China to remain technologically helpless again. Guys, this is important because strategic competition often begins with moments of humiliation. History is full of examples. Countries frequently transform themselves after experiencing vulnerability. China was no different. Then we arrive at Iraq in 2003. Once again, the world watched America launch a rapid campaign that demonstrated incredible coordination between different military branches. But China was not looking at television images the way ordinary viewers were. They were analyzing systems. They were asking how information moved from satellites to commanders to aircraft to soldiers in real time. This concept, often described as network-centric warfare, fascinated Chinese analysts. The speed of decision-making had become a weapon itself. Identifying targets and eliminating them quickly created enormous advantages. If a military asset could be detected, it could potentially be destroyed within minutes. So China reached another important conclusion. Survival depends on either avoiding detection or moving faster than your opponent's decision cycle. That realization drove investments in deception tactics, mobility, and eventually hypersonic technologies. Hypersonic systems became attractive because speed compresses decision time. If incoming threats arrive extremely quickly, defenders have fewer opportunities to react effectively. Now, it is important to remember that military technologies are constantly evolving, and capabilities are often debated publicly. Different analysts disagree about how effective certain systems would be in real combat. But from China's perspective, pursuing these technologies made strategic sense because they complicated America's traditional advantages. Here's where many discussions become too simplistic. People often frame this competition as a race to build stronger weapons. In reality, it is a race to disrupt decision-making. Modern warfare is increasingly about reducing an opponent's ability to think, communicate, and coordinate under pressure. Now let's talk about Afghanistan because this lesson may be even more important than technology itself. The United States entered Afghanistan after the September 11th attacks with broad international support and overwhelming military superiority. Initial objectives were achieved quickly, but over time, the mission expanded and the conflict continued for 2 decades. The human, financial, and political costs grew larger year after year. China watched every stage of that process very carefully. And here's the lesson they may have learned. Democracies can sustain difficult wars, but prolonged conflicts without clear endpoints create political challenges. Public opinion changes. Financial burdens become controversial. Citizens begin questioning long-term commitments. China did not necessarily conclude that America was weak. That would be an oversimplification. Instead, they observed that every political system has limits. Think about this carefully because it matters enormously for future scenarios. If Beijing believes that prolonged uncertainty could weaken support for foreign military commitments, then increasing complexity becomes a strategic objective. In other words, rather than seeking rapid and decisive confrontation, one possible strategy would be creating situations that appear costly, risky, and prolonged. This does not guarantee any outcome, but it influences planning. Now let's move to Ukraine because this is the classroom China is studying in real time today. The conflict has provided unprecedented insights into modern warfare. Drone usage has exploded. Electronic warfare has become essential. Precision weapons are being consumed rapidly. Industrial production capacity has become a major topic of discussion. One of the most significant observations concerns manufacturing. Wars between major powers are not sustained by speeches or strategies alone. They are sustained by factories, supply chains, and logistics. Now think about this. Modern precision weapons are expensive and require advanced industrial ecosystems to produce. If a conflict lasts longer than expected, replenishment becomes critical. China possesses enormous manufacturing capacity in many sectors. Analysts frequently debate how that industrial strength could translate into military endurance during extended crises. Again, nothing is predetermined, but industrial resilience has become a major strategic consideration. Drone warfare is another fascinating lesson. Cheap systems costing thousands of dollars have demonstrated the ability to threaten equipment worth millions. This changes cost calculations dramatically. For decades, militaries prioritized larger and more expensive platforms. Now they must also consider swarms of inexpensive technologies operating simultaneously. Electronic warfare adds another layer of complexity. Communication systems can be disrupted, GPS signals can be challenged, data links can be interrupted. The battlefield increasingly extends into invisible domains. Guys, understand this point because it changes everything. The next major conflict between advanced powers may not begin with dramatic images of tanks crossing borders. It may begin with satellites being disrupted, communication networks being jammed, and information systems being attacked. The battlefield of the 21st century is as much digital as it is physical. Now let's zoom out and connect all these events together. From China's perspective, every American campaign became a classroom. The Gulf War taught information dominance. Kosovo highlighted technological vulnerability. Iraq demonstrated rapid decision cycles. Afghanistan revealed political limitations. Ukraine is exposing industrial and technological realities in real time. 33 years of observation have produced something remarkable. China has systematically attempted to build counters to specific American advantages. Notice what makes this unique. They were not building a military in isolation. They were building a military while studying another military continuously. Think about a chess player who spends 30 years watching every move of a grandmaster. Eventually, patterns emerge. Weaknesses become visible. Alternative approaches develop. That is essentially what has happened. Now, does this mean America is declining? Not necessarily. This is where conversations often become exaggerated. The United States still possesses enormous strengths. Its alliance network remains extensive. Its universities drive innovation. Its economy is among the world's largest. Its military capabilities remain formidable. But the era of effortless dominance may be changing. There is a difference between being powerful and being uncontested. For many years after the Cold War, America operated in an environment where no peer competitor could challenge it comprehensively. Today, that environment looks very different. Strategic competition has returned. And guys, competition changes behavior. It changes budgets. It changes alliances. It changes priorities. Countries throughout Asia are adjusting. Europe is paying closer attention. Nations in the Indo-Pacific are reassessing security relationships. Everyone is adapting to a world that may become more multipolar. Now think about Taiwan because this issue sits at the center of many strategic calculations. Taiwan is not only a political issue, it is also an economic issue, a technological issue, and a geographical issue. The island plays a critical role in global semiconductor supply chains. Any disruption would have worldwide consequences. For China, Taiwan carries historical and political significance. For America and many partners, stability in the region supports broader international interests. This is why analysts pay so much attention to deterrence. The objective for all sides is ideally to avoid conflict entirely. And this brings us to a very important point that often gets lost in dramatic headlines. Military modernization does not automatically mean war is inevitable. History shows that strong militaries can sometimes deter conflict by increasing the costs of confrontation. At the same time, miscalculations remain dangerous. Misunderstandings can escalate tensions unexpectedly. This is why communication channels between major powers matter so much. Now imagine the next 10 years. Artificial intelligence will continue advancing. Autonomous systems will become more sophisticated. Space assets will grow increasingly important. Cyber operations will become more integrated into military planning. The competition will not be limited to ships and missiles anymore. It will include data, computing power, rare earth minerals, semiconductor production, and industrial ecosystems. In many ways, the strategic contest of the future may look more like a technological marathon than a traditional arms race. Who builds faster? Who innovates quicker? Who adapts more effectively? Those questions may prove more important than counting individual weapons. Here's where it gets interesting again. Both countries understand this reality. America is investing heavily in new technologies. China is doing the same. Allies are strengthening partnerships. Supply chains are being reorganized. Economic security is becoming part of national security. The lines between economics and defense are blurring. Think about semiconductor factories. Decades ago, they would rarely appear in military discussions. Today, they are central topics because advanced chips power everything from smartphones to sophisticated defense systems. Energy security is becoming another battlefield. Access to resources influences resilience. Infrastructure protection matters more than ever. This competition is broad, complex, and interconnected. Now ask yourself a simple question. Why does any of this matter to ordinary people? Because global stability affects everyone. Trade routes influence prices. Supply chain disruptions affect businesses. Technological competition shapes jobs. Diplomatic tensions impact financial markets. Even if someone lives thousands of miles away from East Asia, they are connected to these developments. That is the reality of globalization. Guys, one mistake people often make is assuming history moves in straight lines. It does not. Power shifts happen gradually and then suddenly become visible. For years, China's transformation unfolded quietly. Many observers focused only on economic growth, but underneath that growth, a long-term strategic project was unfolding. 33 years of learning, 33 years of adaptation, 33 years of preparing for a world where competition would eventually return. And now we are living in that world. The future is not predetermined. Outcomes remain uncertain. Policies can change. Diplomacy can succeed. Cooperation remains possible even amid rivalry. But assumptions from the 1990s no longer fit today's reality. The world has entered a new chapter. A chapter where strategic competition is real. A chapter where technology matters as much as territory. A chapter where industrial capacity matters as much as military strength. And a chapter where every decision made in the next decade could shape the international order for generations. So perhaps the biggest lesson is not about who is winning or who is losing. Perhaps the biggest lesson is that serious competitors never stop learning. China spent decades learning. America is adapting in response. Other countries are repositioning themselves. And all of us are watching history unfold in real time. Because this is not simply a story about two countries. It is a story about how power evolves in the modern era, how nations respond to changing realities, and how preparation today influences possibilities tomorrow. The era of assuming that one side will automatically dominate every situation may be ending. The era of strategic competition has already begun. And understanding that reality may be one of the most important things anyone can do before the next decade truly arrives.